The loan officer's voice was calm, almost rehearsed, the way people sound when they deliver bad news so often it stops feeling like bad news to them. She said my application had been flagged. She said there was a delinquency on my credit file. She said she was sorry. I asked her to repeat that. She did. I sat in my car in the parking lot of the credit union, engine running, heat blasting against a gray February afternoon, and I tried to make sense of what she had just told me. I had never missed a payment in my life, not once. I had spent the last 4 years rebuilding everything from scratch after my divorce, working extra shifts, eating lunches I packed from home, turning down vacations I could not afford, all so I could get to this exact moment, a mortgage pre-approval for a small house in a quiet neighborhood outside Raleigh that I had already driven past 11 times. I knew which window would be my bedroom. I had already measured it in my head. And now a loan officer named Christine was telling me I had been denied. I thanked her. I don't know why I thanked her. I hung up and stared through my windshield at a row of shopping carts someone had abandoned in the middle of the parking lot. And I felt something cold settle in my chest that had nothing to do with February. I am 38 years old. I work as a dental hygienist at a private practice in Cary, North Carolina. I have lived in Raleigh for 6 years, first in an apartment, then in a slightly larger apartment, saving everything I could, while the numbers in my bank account climbed slowly towards something that looked like a future. My divorce was not dramatic. My ex-husband and I simply grew into two people who had nothing left to say to each other, and we divided what little we had and walked away. I kept my car, my dog, a couch, and a credit score I had nursed from 541 to 748 through 4 years of careful, deliberate, boring financial discipline. That credit score was not just a number to me. It was proof that I had survived something and come out better on the other side. I pulled up the credit monitoring app on my phone. I had not checked it in 3 weeks because nothing had ever changed and I had stopped worrying. Something had changed. There was a Visa card I did not recognize. It had been opened 22 months ago. The credit limit was $20,000. The current balance was $18,412. It was 9 months past due. The billing address listed was on Maple Grove Drive in Columbus, Ohio. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. My mother still lives there. My younger sister lives 7 minutes from my mother. I sat with that information for a long time, long enough for the parking lot to empty around me and the sky to go from gray to darker gray. I kept waiting for some explanation to arrive that made sense, that placed me inside some administrative error or database glitch or innocent mix-up. The kind of thing that happens and gets corrected with one phone call and a form. The explanation that arrived was not innocent. I called the bank directly. The fraud department put me on hold for 11 minutes, and then a man named Daniel came on the line and spoke to me with careful, measured professionalism while I wrote down everything he said. The account had been opened online 22 months ago. It had been opened using my full legal name, my social security number, my date of birth, and my mother's address in Columbus. The phone number on the account was not mine. The email address on the account was not mine. The device used to complete the application had been traced to an IP address in Columbus, Ohio. Daniel told me I needed to file a dispute and a fraud claim. He told me I should also contact the Federal Trade Commission and file a police report. He used the phrase identity theft twice without hesitating, the way you say a word when you are very sure of what it means. I asked him when the card had last been used. He said 3 weeks ago. A charge at a clothing store. A charge at a home goods store. A charge at a gas station on the north side of Columbus. I know the north side of Columbus. My sister lives on the north side of Columbus. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring the way she always does, brightly, like she had been waiting. She asked how I was. She asked about the weather in North Carolina. She asked if I had eaten dinner yet, and I said no, and she said I needed to eat more regularly. We talked like this for approximately 45 seconds before I told her why I was calling. The silence that followed was not the silence of someone confused. It was not the silence of someone trying to remember or piece something together. It was the silence of someone deciding how much to admit. She said, "Oh, honey." That was when I knew. Not who. I already knew who. But the full shape of it, the full scope of how long it had been happening, and how many people in my family had known and said nothing. My mother's "oh, honey" told me all of that in 2 syllables. I asked her to tell me what she knew. She started talking about my sister's situation, how difficult things had been, how my sister's credit had been destroyed 3 years ago when her car was repossessed, and how she had not been able to qualify for anything since then, not an apartment lease, not a credit card, not a phone contract without a deposit. My mother talked about how hard my sister had been trying and how unfair the credit system was and how family was supposed to help each other, and I let her talk because I needed to hear how far she was willing to take this before I interrupted. She took it pretty far. She told me my sister had only needed the card for a little while. She told me my sister had fully intended to pay it back before it ever affected me. She told me they had been careful. She used that word, careful, like the crime was the only problem and the care taken to commit it was a mitigating factor. She told me she had not known it would go this far. She told me she was sorry. She did not tell my sister to stop. For 22 months, she did not tell my sister to stop. I asked my mother one question. I asked her if she had provided my social security number or if my sister had found it some other way. She did not answer that question. I already knew. My social security card was in a folder in a filing cabinet in my childhood bedroom, a room that had been converted into a sewing room but still held the filing cabinet. A filing cabinet I had never thought to take with me because it only held old documents, and who steals from their own family's filing cabinet? I hung up. I did not yell. I did not cry. I was shaking so hard that I had to put my phone down in the cup holder and press both palms flat on my thighs and breathe until the shaking slowed down. My dog, a 7-year-old beagle mix named Clarence, was asleep in the back seat. He lifted his head, looked at me once, and put his head back down. I wished I could do the same. I called my sister. She let it ring. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a text that said simply, "I know. Call me." She did not call me. What she did, I found out later, was call my mother and ask how much I knew. I drove home. I fed Clarence. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a yellow legal pad next to it, and I started documenting everything. I pulled every credit report I was entitled to under federal law. I screenshotted the fraudulent account. I wrote down the account number, the opening date, the balance, the delinquency date, the billing address, every charge Daniel had mentioned. I wrote down my mother's exact words. I wrote down the timeline of 22 months. I wrote the number $18,412 at the top of the page in large print, and I underlined it 3 times. That was my future on that yellow legal pad. That was the house I had been driving past 11 times. That was 4 years of packed lunches and skipped vacations and extra Friday shifts. I filed the FTC report online that night. The FTC website walks you through it with a kind of exhausted thoroughness, like it has seen all of this before, which it has. It generates a recovery plan. Step 1 was a fraud alert with the credit bureaus. Step 2 was disputing the account with the bank. Step 3 was a police report. I drove to the Raleigh Police Department the next morning before work. The officer who took my report was a woman about my age with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a no-nonsense way of asking questions that I found steadying. I told her everything. She asked me to write down my sister's full name, date of birth, and last known address. She told me that because the crime had originated in Columbus, the case would likely be referred there, but that my local report would establish the paper trail. She told me these cases were more common than people thought. She said families. She said it the way people say a word when they have run out of other words for something. I went to work and cleaned teeth for 8 hours and smiled at patients and did not tell anyone what was happening. I answered 2 calls from my mother that I let go to voicemail. I did not call my sister again. There was nothing left to say to my sister that a detective could not say more effectively. The fraud investigator from the bank contacted me 4 days later. Her name was Sandra, and she had been doing this for 14 years, and she was extremely good at her job. She explained that once I had submitted my dispute and supporting documentation, the bank had opened an internal investigation. She told me the application had been completed from an IP address registered to an apartment building on the north side of Columbus, Ohio. She told me the email address used on the account belonged to a Gmail account that had been created the same day as the card application. She told me several of the larger purchases, a sectional sofa, a bedroom set, a television, had been delivered to an address that I would recognize. My sister's apartment. Sandra asked me if I wanted to proceed with the fraud claim or if I wanted to handle this privately within the family. I did not pause for a single second. I told her to proceed. She told me the bank would be filing its own report with Columbus law enforcement, given the dollar amount involved. She said that when fraud exceeded $10,000, it triggered a different category of charge. She said this without particular emphasis, the way you state a fact, but I understood what she was telling me. My mother called me that evening 9 times. On the 10th call I picked up, she was crying, not the polite kind of crying that is really just emotional pressure trying to find an exit, but the deep, unraveling kind that I had only heard from her twice in my life, once when my grandmother died and once when my father left. For a moment, hearing it, I felt the familiar pull of being someone's daughter, the old reflex that says, fix this, make this better, be the one who holds everything together. I let the reflex pass. My mother said my sister was scared. She said my sister had not meant for it to go this far. She said the debt was never supposed to reach this amount, that my sister had been making minimum payments for a while and then lost her job and things spiraled. She said the word spiraled like it absolved something. She asked me if there was any way I could just dispute the card and have it removed from my credit and leave it at that. Let them figure out a payment plan, keep it in the family. I asked my mother if she understood what identity theft was. She said she knew it sounded bad. I told her it did not sound bad. I told her it was a federal crime. I told her my sister had spent $18,400 on my name and my social security number and my 4 years of rebuilt credit and had destroyed a mortgage application I had spent the better part of a year preparing. 4. I told her I had not taken a vacation in 3 years. I told her I had eaten leftovers for lunch every single workday for 14 months. I told her I was 38 years old and I had wanted one thing, one small house with one window I had already measured in my head, and that my sister had taken that from me while my mother helped her hide it. My mother said she was sorry. I told her I knew she was. I told her sorry was going to have to stand in line. I hung up. I blocked both of them. Not permanently, maybe, but for now. For as long as it took to get through what was coming without someone calling me every night trying to negotiate my dignity down to a manageable size. The Columbus Police Department contacted me 2 weeks later. A detective named Marcus left me a voicemail, and when I called him back, he was thorough and direct and asked all the same questions the Raleigh officer had asked, plus several more. He asked about the filing cabinet. He asked about my childhood bedroom. He asked when I had last visited Columbus and when I would have last had reason to access or discuss any document in that cabinet. I told him I had not been back to Columbus in over a year, that I had not opened that filing cabinet since I was 26 and going through old papers after my divorce. He asked me if I believed my mother had knowingly provided my personal information to my sister. I thought about the way my mother had gone silent when I asked her that same question. I told him what I thought. He thanked me and told me the investigation was ongoing and that I would be notified when charges were filed. He said it in a tone that suggested the when was not an if. Sandra from the bank's fraud department called me the same week to tell me the dispute had been resolved in my favor. The account had been closed and the debt was being discharged as fraudulent. She told me all 3 credit bureaus had been notified and that I should see the delinquency removed from my report within 30 to 60 days. She told me my credit score would recover. She said that in her experience, once the fraudulent account was removed and the fraud alert was lifted, people in my situation typically saw their score return to normal within a few months. She asked me if I had any questions. I asked her if she had ever had a case like this one before. A family member. A sister. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said yes, more than she could count. She said it the way people say something when the truth of it is exhausting. I thanked her and let her go. My credit score came back. It took 41 days. The disputed account disappeared from my report, and my score climbed back above where it had been before any of this happened. A small, fierce correction that felt like getting a piece of yourself returned through the mail. I made an appointment with Christine at the credit union and sat across from her desk and restarted my mortgage application from scratch. She pulled my report. She looked at the numbers. She did not say anything about the previous denial. She just started filling out the paperwork and asking me about the property I was interested in. I told her about the house, the neighborhood, the window. She said it sounded nice. 40 days after that, Marcus called me back. My sister had been charged with identity theft in the first degree, fraudulent use of a credit card, and unauthorized use of personal identifying information. Under Ohio law, the combination of those charges, given the dollar amount and the duration of the crime, carried a potential sentence of up to 8 years, though Marcus told me first-time offenders rarely saw maximum sentences. What they typically saw was felony conviction, restitution orders, supervised probation, and a permanent record that would follow them through every background check, every job application, every apartment lease, every future credit inquiry for the rest of their lives. I thought about what my sister had done with $18,000, a sectional sofa, a bedroom set, a television, gas on the north side of Columbus. I thought about what I had done for 4 years with the same money. Every careful, boring, deliberate dollar. My mother was not charged as a co-conspirator, though she had been questioned. Marcus told me there was not sufficient evidence to prove she had directly provided my information rather than simply failed to stop my sister from accessing it. He told me the legal distinction was narrow and frustrating. He told me she had fully cooperated with the investigation, which had been taken into account. I did not have feelings about that immediately. The feelings came later, slowly, the way a bruise shows up the day after the fall instead of at the moment of impact. My mother had known for 22 months. She had known and called me on my birthday every year and asked about the weather in North Carolina and whether I was eating regularly. She had known and said nothing until the moment she was caught, and then what she had said was, "Oh, honey," which is what you say when you feel bad for someone without intending to do anything about it. I have not spoken to my sister since the night I called, and she let it go to voicemail. Her lawyer sent me a letter some months later asking if I would consider a victim impact statement in support of a reduced sentence. I wrote the statement. I was honest in it. I described what had been taken from me and what it had cost me and how long it had taken to rebuild what they had destroyed. I did not ask for leniency, and I did not ask for the maximum sentence. I simply told the truth, which felt, in that moment, like the most powerful thing I had the right to do. The house closed on a Thursday in late October. It was cold the way North Carolina is cold in October, which is to say, not very. Just enough to make the light look different, sharper, and more golden. The kind of afternoon that makes everything look like it was arranged by someone who wanted you to feel something. I drove to the house from the title company with my keys in my jacket pocket. I parked in the driveway. Clarence was in the back seat. He had no opinion about the house, only about whether there was a yard. And there was a yard. And he went immediately to investigate the perimeter while I stood on the front porch and looked at the window. My bedroom window, the one I had measured in my head 11 times from a car parked on the street. I stood there for a while, just standing, feeling the keys in my pocket. There was nothing dramatic about the moment. Nobody arrived to witness it. No one called to congratulate me. It was just me and Clarence and a small house on a quiet street in Raleigh, and the specific, private satisfaction of something you built entirely by yourself, including the part where someone tried to take it from you and you built it anyway. I have thought a lot, in the months since, about what I would have done differently. The honest answer is not much. I could not have predicted my sister would steal from me. I could not have known the filing cabinet mattered until it did. What I could have done, and what I tell anyone now who will listen, is this. Your credit report is a living document, and you should read it the way you read your bank statement. Every month, without waiting for a crisis to give you a reason. The FTC has a website. The process exists. It is not fast and it is not painless, but it works. And the people who work in fraud investigation are, in my experience, competent and unsurprised and on your side in a way that feels genuinely useful when your own family is not. My mother called me in November, 3 weeks after I moved in. I let it ring twice before I answered. She asked how I was. She asked about the weather. She asked if I had a place to put a Christmas tree. I told her I did. We talked for a few minutes. It was careful and surface level, and nothing was resolved, and nothing was pretended to be resolved. Before she hung up, she said she was proud of me. She said it quietly, like she was aware of everything the sentence had to carry. I said thank you. I don't know what my mother and I are to each other now. I don't know what that relationship becomes after something like this, whether it slowly repairs itself back into something functional, or whether it stays permanently altered, a door that still opens but no longer hangs quite right. I am 38 years old and I'm still figuring out how to hold the people who love you imperfectly, who fail you in ways that were preventable, who say, "Oh, honey," when what they mean is, "I knew and I let it happen, and I am not entirely sure I would do differently if I had the chance again." What I know is this: my name is mine. My social security number is mine. My credit score, rebuilt from 541 over 4 years of deliberate, unglamorous work, is mine. My house is mine. My bedroom window, the one I measured 11 times from a car on the street, is mine. Nobody gets to take those things. Not a stranger and not a sister and not a mother who went silent when I asked her the one question that mattered. I moved the filing cabinet, by the way. After I closed on the house, I drove to Columbus and collected everything that was mine from my childhood bedroom. My mother was at the house. We did not argue. We carried boxes to my car and we stood in the driveway and she hugged me for a long time without saying anything. I let her. Then I drove back to Raleigh with the filing cabinet in pieces in my trunk and Clarence asleep in the back seat and the deed to my house in a folder on the passenger seat. I did not look in my rearview mirror until I was back on the highway. Some things you put down and keep driving. Some doors you close not because you are done with them, but because you need both hands free for what comes next. I needed both hands. I had a house to unpack.